What's up, my comic comrades, and happy Superman Day. That's right, the summer of Superman is officially upon us. In fact, DC just released an awesome behind-the-scenes featurette for the upcoming Superman movie, which just made us even more excited about it. The tone and direction is just giving off vibes of classic Superman comics combined with Richard Donner's first Superman film with Christopher Reeve, which is exactly what he said he was going for, and we're 100% here for it. We also get our very first official look at Metamorpho, and he looks phenomenal. Looks like he's ripped right out of the pages of the comic book. And then there's this shot right here, which may or may not be Lex Luthor's iconic suit from the comic books. You can't really tell if it's purple and green, but God, I hope so. Anyway, DC also dropped a supersized Summer of Superman special this week with writers Dan Slott, Josh Williamson, and Mark Waid that sets the stage for the major story plots around the Man of Steel in comics for the rest of the year. We're going to break that whole special down in the coming days, but the headliner for the Summer of Superman is without question James Gunn's Superman movie in July. So for Superman Day, we're kicking off our own Summer of Superman here on Variant with a complete breakdown of one of the stories James Gunn listed as the inspiration for the movie. It also happens to be one of the most iconic Superman stories of all time, and that is Alan Moore's Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, which is a two-issue story that takes place in Superman issue 423 and Action Comics 583 from September of 1986. Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow is an imaginative story that tells the final tale of Silver Age Superman, because around this time, DC was rebooting their universe with the Crisis on Infinite Earths story. So ongoing editor Julius Schwartz decided to pretend his last issues of Superman and Action Comics were the last two issues of Superman ever. This allowed Alan Moore to make Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow a definitive ending for the Silver Age version of the character. So let's get into it, shall we? The story starts off with Tim Crane ringing the doorbell of Lois's house. When she opens the door, he says, "Excuse me, Miss Lois Lane?" She replies, "It's Mrs. Lois Elliott now. Anyway, come in. You must be Tim Crane from The Planet." He says, "That's right. Is it still convenient to do the interview with you for the Superman Memorial Edition?" She replies, "Sure, my husband's out at work and the baby's asleep, so we won't be disturbed." "Will this room be okay?" He tells her, "Fine. Just let me set up my recorder," as he speaks into his recorder saying, "Testing, August 16th, 1997. Tim Crane interviewing Lois Elliott for the Daily Planet lead feature, titled The Last Days of Superman." So this is a crazy start. Already, one, Lois Lane is now married to someone that's not Clark Kent or Superman, and two, Superman is apparently dead, hence Tim Crane interviewing Lois for the Last Days of Superman piece for The Planet. So let's see where this takes us. Tim then tells Lois, "I think that should be okay. I feel kind of nervous interviewing you, Mrs. Elliott. You're sort of a legend around the Daily Planet. I'm probably doing this all wrong." As she brings some coffee, she says, "You're fine," and it's Lois. He then says, "Well, I suppose I should start by asking about the years leading up to Superman's disappearance and presumed death. Were those happy times?" She replies, "Happy? I don't know. They were a mixture of things, like most times, but at least they were quiet. Luthor seemed to be lying low, and 2 years earlier, Brainiac's last organic metal body had been pounded into a state beyond repair. As I recall, Superman recovered every fragment except the creature's head, and the Parasite and Terra Man had destroyed each other in a lethal clash of egos, and it seemed like there was nobody left to fight. Mostly, Superman worked in space doing research for the government. It was while he was still out in space returning from a mission that we got our first taste of the carnage that was to follow, as we see Superman arrive back down in Metropolis with the city on fire all around him. As he asks, "What's happened here?" Lois and Jimmy tell him, "Superman, thank heavens you're back." Jimmy says, "I tried my signal watch earlier, but I guess you were out of range." Superman's all like, "Look at all this destruction. What caused it? Was it a bomb?" Lois tells him, "Worse than a bomb, Superman. It was Bizarro." Lois continues to explain he was completely berserk, smashing things, hurting people, pushing over buildings. It was horrible. Jimmy then tells him, about 20 minutes ago, he retreated into that department store and hasn't come out since. So obviously Superman goes inside saying, "Okay, I'm here now. I'll handle it. Bizarro." Incredible. When Superman goes in, he yells for Bizarro saying, "Show yourself. I want an explanation for this." Bizarro, while destroying things, says, "That easy. It am part of Genius Bizarro's self-improvement plan. See, me suddenly realized that me not perfect, imperfect duplicate. Maybe me not trying hard enough. Example, when your planet Krypton blew up by accident, you am coming to Earth as a baby. So me decide to blow up whole Bizarro world on purpose and come to Earth as adult." Superman asks, "The Bizarro world blown up?" Bizarro tells him, "Right, pretty imperfect, huh?" Superman confused is like, "Bizarro, what's happened to you? I can't believe you really destroyed your home world." Bizarro then laughs saying, "That am only beginning." Next, me realized that Superman never killed kill, so me kill lots of people. Them very grateful, scream with happiness. But then me finally understand what me need to be perfect, imperfect duplicate. It am little blue kryptonite meteor that me carry in a lead case for good luck. See, you are alive, Superman, and if me perfect, imperfect duplicate, then me have to be, and before he can say dead, we see Bizarro kill himself with blue kryptonite. Lois, who's telling Tim the story, says it didn't make any sense at all, even by Bizarro's standards. After years of harmless stupidity, that strange backwards creature had suddenly launched himself on a rampage of genocide, homicide, and finally suicide. Still, after what came next, Bizarro's death seemed trivial. Yeah, but before we move on, we've got to stop and recognize that this story killed off Bizarro, one of the most iconic Superman villains, and they did it in an insane way, by having him kill himself. And things only get crazier from here. But first, I also know you're sweating this Superman jersey I'm wearing. Don't worry, I'm gonna tell you where I got it. Because you deserve some fresh drip as well, and our friends at Spirit Jersey, today's sponsor, can have you ready for Superman summer with all the dope fan gear you can handle. In fact, this Superman jersey I'm wearing is part of their DC Universe collection that just released this week, which has several items that I'm all about. I'm looking at you, Catwoman. Anyway, the whole collection is a tribute to DC's most iconic characters, both heroes and villains, with collectible high-quality Spirit jerseys made for every kind of DC fan. And of course, with Superman returning to the big screen this July, Spirit Jersey is welcoming back the Man of Steel in style with several pieces from the collection. This Krypton-born Earth-raised Spirit jersey has a bold red aesthetic, Kryptonian language script on the sleeve, and nods to Superman's origin story. Then we have this blue Superman in the Daily Planet jersey with the centered Superman logo chested that is inspired by Kal-El's cosmic roots. This collection also dives into the darker side of the DC universe with pieces featuring Michelle Pfeiffer's Catwoman, Joker's Arkham Asylum breakout moment, and the notorious Harley Quinn. Not to mention this Batman Gotham City's Protector jersey. I love how it gives off both comic and animated series vibes. But go shop the DC collection for yourself exclusively at spiritjersey.com. Again, they just dropped this week, so get them while they're still in stock. And just for our Variant fam, if you use code VARIANT, you'll score free shipping on orders over 100. Just click the link in our description to snag some goodies today. Alright, let's jump back into the issue. As Lois says, it only gets worse from here. When she says that, Tim says, "You're talking about the unmasking?" She says yes, and we then see what the unmasking was as we get a flashback of Superman getting a package at the Daily Planet before he's about to go on air. When he opens it, it's a bunch of Superman action figures. Clark is obviously confused, and Lana, who's with him, says, "Oh, I've seen those around. They're great. Have you seen how they work? You just press their legs together like this, and while she demonstrates, they start shooting lasers out of their eyes as the rest of the action figures start flying out of the box, shooting laser vision all over the studio before ultimately attacking Clark." And yes, I know it's not laser vision, it's heat vision, but that's Superman. These are toys, okay? So they're laser vision. Anyway, Lana screams, "They're turning on Clark. They're slicing him up. This is horrible." But when the smoke clears, he's fine because he's Superman. But his clothes have been disintegrated by the lasers, revealing to everyone at the Daily Planet that Clark is indeed the Man of Steel. Lana says, "Clark, it was you all these years?" As the action figures start talking, saying, "That's right, Miss Lang. It was him all the time. He just combed his hair back and stuck on a pair of glasses. What a great gag. Come on, we've toyed with him enough." Lana says to Clark, "Those voices." He says, "Yes, I recognize them. The Toy Man and the Prankster." "Okay, how did you know I was Clark Kent?" They answer, "What a moron. What an imbecile. Why don't you look in the big box and find out?" And when Superman opens it, he finds the dead body of his old Smallville friend, Pete Ross, who had known of Clark's secret identity for years. The Toy Man and Prankster tells Superman, "We were able to drag your secret identity out of him with a little brainwashing." Superman then tracks down Prankster and Toy Man by following the radio waves of their voices. And when he gets there, he takes them out easily. Lois even says they gave up almost immediately, but didn't seem able to tell him why they suddenly decided to start murdering his friends. When he asked, they just looked dazed and confused, and of course, putting them behind bars didn't mend the senseless damage they had caused. Pete Ross was still dead, and so was Clark Kent. Once publicly revealed, his secret identity was useless, so he dropped it. At Pete's funeral, Superman tells everyone there, "All these years, my greatest nightmare has been that someone would strike at me through my friends. Now it's coming true. If the nuisances from my past are coming back as killers, what happens when the killers come back?" As the interview with Lois continues, she tells him he didn't have to mention any names. We all knew who he was talking about. about? The big guns, Luthor, Brainiac. What if they came back more vicious than ever? Tim says, I thought Brainiac had been destroyed. Lois replies, so did we. But as we found out later, other people hadn't given up hope so easily. As we see Luthor in the Antarctic searching for Brainiac's head, which is the only piece that hadn't been found by Superman. And when he finds it, he says, there you are. To be frank, I've seen you looking better. Not that I'm complaining, I've always wanted to open you up and study that alien technology. Now that you're dead, I'm saved the embarrassment of asking. And besides, I think you would have wanted it this way. But to Luthor's surprise, Brainiac is not dead. The head actually turns on and the metal plates from Brainiac start making their way up Luthor's arm and onto his head, forming a metal cap merging to Luthor's head as Luthor says, stop this. I didn't know you were alive. Brainiac, I'm warning you. No. But it's too late. Brainiac integrates himself into Luthor's mind as he says, greetings, Lex Luthor. Your body, mind, and vocal cords all belong to me. I welcome you to the new Brainiac-Luthor team-up. Your brain is superb. Its stored data massively useful. The Kryptonian has interrupted my programs and caused me indignity. I shall tolerate him no longer. Now raise my faceplate to your head as Brainiac fully takes over Lex Luthor's body, setting off to start plotting his next evil plan. Then back to the Lois interview, she tells Tim, naturally we weren't aware of Brainiac's return until later. Over in Metropolis, however, we had our own problems. I remember it was just a couple of days after Pete's funeral. A bunch of Metallos start scaling the Daily Planet as they say, we're coming, friends of Clark Kent, we're coming to kill you, the way Kent killed my brother. Prepare to be massacred, for we have no pity. They then start crashing through the windows as Lois says, there's too many of them. Jimmy, use the watch. He tells her, I am. You just can't hear it. Nobody can except him. One of the Metallos says to Jimmy, out of my way, kid, while smacking him. It's the woman I want to kill the most, alien-loving tramp. As he grabs her, she says, let me go. With her shirt ripping, she falls out the window, but of course, Superman arrives just in time to catch her. He then flies her up to the Daily Planet globe and says, I don't know how Metallo converted so many humans into creatures like himself, but there's a fast way of counting them. He then starts rubbing the post that's holding the Daily Planet globe up, saying you rub any iron rod in the same direction for long enough, and it turns into an electromagnet. Or in this case, a super magnet. He then picks up the Daily Globe and uses it as a magnet to attract all of the Metallos. Once he gathers them all up, he flew them to the Teresa prison complex. After which, he insisted on taking all his closest friends to the Fortress of Solitude, where he could defend them if the situation continued to worsen. Lois then tells Tim, eventually we were all at the fortress. I hadn't been there for a while, but it was still the same, big and remote and lonely. It wasn't called the Fortress of Solitude for nothing. Shortly after, another old friend joined us, Crypto, who had been roaming the stars for years, but now he'd returned. Why, unless he sensed what the rest of us had? Despite our welcoming hugs, his arrival struck an ominous note, and we see they all got out of the city just in time because Kryptonite Man arrived asking everyone in Metropolis where he is. Why doesn't that Cape Coward come out and die like a man? As Brainiac arrives in his newly built ship, watching Kryptonite Man saying, we were not alone in our decision to come here. Superman has apparently fled to the Arctic Circle. The Kryptonite Man, while intellectually limited, provides an ideal assassination weapon. This remodeled ship, though inferior to my original sentient craft, will provide speedier transport to the north than whatever vehicle he arrived in. I propose we take him with us. You have no objections? As Brainiac is asking Lex, but Lex clearly cannot control his own body, so Brainiac is like, very good. Then we shall proceed as he sucks Kryptonite Man up to take him to the Arctic. Back at the fortress, we see Superman's friends getting acclimated, but scared about everything. We see Perry White and his wife Alice sleeping in separate rooms as they're currently going through a divorce, and Lana and Lois, who've never really been that good of friends as they're in a love triangle with Clark, crying in each other's arms, worried about Clark/Superman's future. This is followed by Superman reuniting with Krypto, his canine friend, in front of the memorial for Supergirl, who died in the Infinite Crisis event. Then right after this, we see the Legion of Superheroes teleport in to the Fortress of Solitude. They're accompanied by a young Supergirl, who again has died in this timeline. We find out the reason the Legion of Superheroes came here was to give Superman a gift, a golden statue in his honor. Superman says, well, thank you, but why did you choose this particular date to present it to me? Brainiac says, well, because our histories mark this date as a special time in your life. Therefore, we came here to meet with you again and salute you. The Legion of Superheroes, along with the younger version of Supergirl, then returned back to their timeline as Lois says to Tim, Superman never told me what happened that night before the siege began, but as soon as I saw him the next morning, I knew something had upset him. He looked funny. He looked as if he'd been crying, as we see Superman alone on the last page of the issue, preparing for the worst. And with that, my friends, we move on to the last issue of this iconic story. The story continues in Action Comics 583, where Lois Lane asks Tim Crane, "More coffee, Tim? Interviews always make me so dry with me doing all the talking." "You must be very bored." He responds, "Oh no, it's just what the planet's memorial needs. I'm just checking where we got to." Superman's old enemies had started returning with a vengeance, and he had took everyone to the fortress for safety. Lois replies, "That's right, me, Lana, Jimmy, Perry, and Alice White, all his friends were all," as her husband Jordan turns the corner saying, "Do I smell coffee?" Lois says, "Best darn nose for coffee in all of Pittstown. You'll have to fix it yourself, hun. I'm busy being a celebrity." She then tells him, "Tim, this is my husband Jordan. Jordy, this is Tim Crane from the planet." They then shake hands with Tim saying, "I hope you don't mind me interviewing your wife about," well, Jordan says, "About her ex? No, I can live with it. He weren't nothing special. Us ordinary working slobs, son, we're the real heroes." Lois then asks, "Where have I gotten to, Tim?" He says, "You were all up in the Arctic with Superman." She says, "That's right. We stood on a balcony and watched as he destroyed the Golden Key." I think that's when we first realized that he was preparing for a siege. Superman's last stand. All that day in the fortress, Perry and Alice kept bickering. Everybody was so intense. We were scared. We knew that something was bearing down on us, but we didn't know what. And even if we had known, we wouldn't have felt any better. As we see Brainiac arrive with Kryptonite Man. Brainiac controlling Lex says, "I shall devise a plan covering all the eventualities." Kryptonite Man asks, "All eventualities, Brainiac? Even that one?" As they see the legion of supervillains arrive. They then come up to Lex and realize he's being controlled by Brainiac, as Brainiac says, "Lex Luthor is merely the vessel of Brainiac. What manner of beings are you?" They say, "We are Saturn Woman, Lightning Lord, and Cosmic King from the 30th century. According to the Legion, during these days, Superman met his greatest foe in battle, and was no more. Certain of victory, we've come to participate." Brainiac says, "His greatest foe? Of course, I shrunk Kandor. I was always his greatest foe. Why should I permit you to share my victory?" They say, "Because we're from the future. We know things. For example, it is said that during Superman's last days, all of Earth's champions flocked to help him." Brainiac says, "That is logical. This world's other superhumans are certain to interfere. I shall erect an impenetrable force screen immediately. For resisting my will, for destroying my body, for these fronts shall the Krypton know the revenge of Brainiac, and none shall help him." As he erects a force screen, trapping him and the Fortress of Solitude inside. And when Superman's hero friends arrive, like Batman and Robin, Wonder Woman, Shazam, and more, they are unable to penetrate the force screen. Now, after this, we're taken back into the Fortress of Solitude, where Superman has a heart-to-heart with Perry. Meanwhile, Jimmy and Lana, tired of being helpless, sitting on the sidelines, use things in the Fortress of Solitude to give themselves powers. Jimmy takes an Elastalad serum, giving him the ability to stretch, and Lana takes a dip in this water that gives her powers similar to a Kryptonian. While Jimmy says, "Hey, look here, it's a case of souvenir costumes." Meanwhile, as Clark is continuing to talk to Perry, he says, "See, when I was Superboy, Lana was the only girl I loved. She still represents Smallville to me, that part of my life. Because of that, I could never cast her aside. But since I've grown and become a man, there's only ever been one woman for me, Lois. Beautiful Lois. I love her, Perry. Dear God, I love her so much, but I can't tell her without hurting Lana. I'd never hurt Lana, so I just walk around with this secret, this weight in my heart, and I'll carry it with me to my grave, and neither of them will ever know." But unknown to Lana, she does know, as she now has super hearing and heard his confession to Perry, as her and Jimmy suit up in their super suits that they found. Jimmy then asks Lana, "Are you ready? Is anything wrong?" While she puts on her boots, she says, "Wrong? No. Why should anything be wrong? I'm ready now. Let's get out there and wreck that force screen and get him out of this mess. We're only second stringers, Jimmy, but we'll show them nobody loved him better than us. Nobody." So Jimmy and Lana go out there, and Lana starts attacking Kryptonite Man, saying, "What are you going to do to someone who doesn't give a damn about kryptonite?" As he screams, "Brainiac, help!" she then smacks him across the face, saying, "Nobody's gonna help you. Nobody is gonna help any of you. Take out the generator, Jimmy, while I deal with their leader." Brainiac then says, "Foolish woman, my victory is predetermined. You serve only to hasten your own doom." She says, "Luthor, why are you talking like that? And on your head, what's?" Luthor then fights back long enough, saying, "Lana, Brainiac got me. Kill me, Lana, please, kill me." Brainiac then says, "Luthor, be silent. I command you." Lana says, "Lex?" As he says, "Lana, do it. Please do it." And she slaps him across the face with her superpowers, killing him with a single blow. The Legion of Supervillains even say, "She killed the Luthor Brainiac thing. How can we stop her?" Saturn Woman says, "I'm scanning her mind. She's received her power from bathing in some kind of radioactive pool." As Cosmic King says, "Then it's easy. I just use my transmutation abilities to turn the radioactive traces in her tissue to normal body salts." And suddenly, there's nothing holding her up. And when she falls to the ground, Lightning Lord says, "Taking a fall, my dear? Here, let me give you a helping hand." And as he grabs her hand, he uses lightning to fry her. killing her. Jimmy then says, "You murdering scum, you killed her. Well, you're too late. Your force screen's wrecked. You're finished," as Brainiac gets up and shoots Jimmy from behind, killing him. So this is crazy. Jimmy just died, and Lana just died. But that's not even it. Alan Moore even killed off Bizarro in the story. Apparently everybody dies. In any case, Brainiac gets up controlling Luthor's dead body, saying, "I'm Brainiac, producer of Kandor, and his greatest foe. My victory is preordained. Do you think that I would let the death of this body stand in my way? Luthor's nerves, his muscles, are intact. I can manipulate them at least for long enough to ensure Superman's destruction." Kryptonite Man then says, "Brainiac? Something's wrong. If Olsen wrecked the generator, why hasn't the force screen collapsed?" Meanwhile, outside the force screen, we see Batman, Robin, Martian Manhunter, Green Arrow, and Hawkman trying to break in to help, but to no avail. As Brainiac says, "Analysis. Earth's champions remain outside. Some unknown force maintains the shield. Perhaps it is destiny. In any eventuality, we must make use of it while this fluke situation endures." Now after this, we see Kryptonite Man trying to make his way into the fortress. But Krypto ain't having that and attacks Kryptonite Man and kills him, but in the process, dies as well from kryptonite poisoning. And that's the fourth death in this story so far. They just keep coming. At this point, the Legion of supervillains infiltrate the Fortress of Solitude, and Superman realizes they're the ones that hurt Lana, who killed Lana, at which point he starts blasting heat vision in their direction. Saturn Girl then reads his mind, saying, "He isn't bluffing, he's prepared to kill." Cosmic King then says, "Maybe this wasn't such a good idea. From our legends, I'd expected a quick victory, but this is dangerous," at which point they leave. But it's also crazy that Saturn Girl reading Superman's mind was like, "Yeah, he's actually gonna kill us this time." That's how mad they made him. Then right outside the Fortress of Solitude, they see Brainiac still trying to animate Lex's dead body. But at this point, the rigor mortis has set in, and Brainiac can no longer control Luthor's body. As Brainiac says, "The villains from the future, they said you would meet your greatest foe in battle and be no more. Me, Brainiac, your greatest foe. I am predestined to destroy you," as he falls over. Brainiac then tells Lex's body, "No, get up, Luthor. I will not be betrayed by your human weakness." But as Brainiac says that, he's forced to flee Luthor's body, crawling away, saying, "I'm coming for you, Kryptonian. My victory is inevitable." But he soon dies inches away from Lex's body. As Lois tells Tim, the disintegrating collection of plates and circuits crawled a couple of inches, propelled by sheer malice, then stopped moving. Brainiac was dead. It was over. Except that couldn't be it. Superman and Lois just sat there. As Lois said, he stood silent for 5 minutes and frowning, figuring something out. When he spoke ever so softly, it still made me jump. As Superman says, "Of course, Bizarro, the prankster, the Toy Man, Metallo, Brainiac, the Kryptonite Man, the Legion of supervillains. The only name missing, isn't there? I know you're there, Mxyzptlk. Come out and show yourself," as he does just that. Mxyzptlk then says, "So you finally guessed. Greetings, Superman. Greetings from the 5th dimension." Superman says, "You were guiding all this from behind the scenes, all this killing and destruction." Mxyzptlk reveals that yes, it's been him all along, that since he's immortal, he gets bored every 2,000 years or so he has to find something to do to entertain him. And this 2,000 years, he wanted the death of Superman. He then goes on to say, "Did you honestly believe a 5th dimensional sorcerer would resemble a funny little man in a derby hat? Would you like to see how I really look?" as he changes into a monstrous form of violet and black energy. While Superman is still holding the statue he was given by the Legion of Superheroes, Lois says, "Why did they give you that statue?" Superman says, "As a tribute, although they must have known how much it would have disturbed me." She says, "Exactly. So maybe they gave it to you for another reason, some kind of hint. Maybe? Take another look at it, Superman." And as Superman looks at it, he sees that the statue is holding the Phantom Zone projector, at which point Superman realizes, that's it. That's how I defeat him. So before Mxyzptlk can take out Superman, he grabs the Phantom Zone projector and says, "That's right, Mxyzptlk, time to die." As Lois tells Tim, he turned the Phantom Zone projector's single Cyclops eye, staring from between his hands, finger moving towards its black button. Mxyzptlk had no means of escape, except one, the utterance of his reverse name. The creature's magic returned him to the 5th dimension, while at the same instant, the ray sent him into the Phantom Zone. As Superman says to Lois, torn in half between dimensions. He panicked when he saw the ray and made a fatal error, just as I knew he would. I killed him, Lois. I intended to kill him. I just couldn't risk letting anything that powerful and malignant survive. So I made up my mind, and I did it. I broke my oath. I killed him. Lois says, "But you had to. You haven't done anything wrong." Superman tells her, "Yes, I have. Nobody has the right to kill. Not Mxyzptlk, not you, not Superman. Especially not Superman. As Lois continues to tell the story, she says, "He turned and walked away in complete silence. I ran after, calling his name. He didn't reply, and by the time I realized where he was headed, it was too late, as he walks into a room containing gold kryptonite. If you are unaware, gold kryptonite strips Superman of his Kryptonian abilities to absorb yellow sun radiation, which is what gives him his powers. Effectively, gold kryptonite strips Superman of his powers." Lois continues to say, "As he walked into the blinding golden light, he turned and looked back over his shoulder. He smiled at me. I never saw Superman again." With Missy Spitlick's destruction, the forest screen his magic had been maintaining vanished, and the heroes were able to enter. The wreckage in and around the fortress seemed strewn with bodies, those of his most bitter enemies and those of his most loyal friends. I remember the Batman describing it as like walking amongst the fragments of a legend. Death and destruction were everywhere, almost everywhere. They found me outside the locked golden kryptonite chamber, weeping. When Wonder Woman and Captain Marvel ripped the vault door open, it was empty. He was gone. As we were brought back to Lois's house, she says, they discovered a hidden passage leading out the fortress, and it was finally concluded that he walked out powerless into the sub-zero waste to freeze. They never found his body. Tim then says, "It's getting pretty late, and I think the interview is almost through. Tell me, Mrs. Elliott, what do you think of the rumor that Superman is still alive somewhere?" She tells him, "Well, I'm sure a lot of people would like to believe that, but as far as I'm concerned, Superman died in the Arctic. I was there." As he gathers his things, he says, "Of course, I'm sorry if that last question was tactless. You just hear a lot of talk. I guess it's the same with Jim Morrison and Bruce Lee. All the old rumors." Jordan then brings Jonathan, Lois, and Jordan's baby to her as she says, "You're awake. Have you got a kiss for mommy?" And with that, Tim says, "I ought to be going. I'll send you a copy of the interview to check out once I've transcribed it." She says, "Well, if you got time, I know what it's like. Give my love to the planet." He then says, "I will. Thanks for everything, Mrs. Elliott." "You too, Mr. Elliott. I'll be in touch." Jordan then says, "Bye, fella. Nice meeting you." Then on the last page of the issue, Lois says, "Well, he's gone. I guess the media won't be bothering us for another 10 years now." Jordan says, "Let's hope so. Down you go, Jonathan. You play for a while." As Jonathan starts playing with coal, Lois tells Jordan, "You really love it, don't you? Just going to work every day, taking out the garbage, changing Jonathan's diapers, all that normal stuff." He says, "You can't beat it, although maybe I could live without the diapers." And as they hug each other, we see their son, Jonathan, turn a piece of coal into diamond, meaning he's extremely strong. Lois then tells Jordan, "You know, you were pretty hard on Superman earlier." He says, "Superman, he was overrated and too wrapped up in himself. He thought the world couldn't get along without him." Lois then says, "After dinner, if Jonathan's quiet, I thought maybe bed and a bottle of wine. And then after that, I figured we'd just live happily ever after." Sound good to you? Jordan says, "Lois, my love, what do you think?" As we see Jordan close the door, winking at us to the reader, telling us he's actually Clark. That, along with us seeing their son has the powers of a Kryptonian, being able to turn coal into a diamond with his bare hands. So there you go, friends. This was the last Silver Age Superman story, an imaginary tale of Superman's last story ever, where they gave him his happy ending, a perfect way to end Superman's story permanently. The twist where Superman is still alive but without his powers, but their son has superpowers, was a mind-blowing twist and still one of the best twists in all of comics. This 2-issue series is easily one of the best Superman stories ever told. In a lot of ways, it's kind of the Dark Knight Returns of Superman, in the sense that it gives us a possible end for Superman's story, much like the Dark Knight Returns does for Batman. But what did you guys think of this storyline? Have you read it before? And what parts of this do you hope they use for James Gunn's Superman film? Let us know all of that in the comments. Other than that, we will see you next time when we talk about all things comics.